All right. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Jeb Ori. I'm the co-founder of Phone to Action, and I really appreciate your time today. It's been 1 week, just 1 week. It may feel like a little bit longer, but 1 week ago we woke up Wednesday morning, or you may have been up late Tuesday night like me, to something that was unexpected to a lot of people. So we put together this panel to provide some expert insight on the role of digital and the role of media in the election, the minority vote, and takeaways for advocacy and for governmental affairs. So what's next? The event is being webcasted, so hi. And you can feel free to encourage people to share using the hashtag #ElectionAftermath. That's hashtag #ElectionAftermath, so maybe we can make that trending. I'm going to ask the panelists, I'm going to introduce the panelists one by one. They're going to sit down. And as I start to introduce you, please come up, wait here, and then you can take a seat. But we're thrilled. We have an all-star panel. The first gentleman I'm going to introduce is Roland Estrada. He's the Vice President for National Community Empowerment for Univision Communications. That's a leading media company for Hispanic America. He directs programming for 126 broadcast and radio stations throughout the U.S. and Puerto Rico. And he was the key architect for Univision's Vote for Your America campaign. The nonpartisan voter engagement campaign was one of the most successful campaigns of the year, efforts of the year in driving Latino voter registration, and contributed to record levels of Hispanic voter turnout in both early voting and on Election Day. We're going to hear a lot more about that. Prior, he was the member of the executive cabinet at National Council of La Raza, and prior to that, he ran marketing for the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. He's a San Diego native. Roland Martin. Roland is the host and managing editor of TV1's NewsOne Now. It's the first daily morning news program in history to focus on news and analysis of politics, entertainment, sports, and culture from an explicitly African-American perspective. He's on the nationally syndicated Tom Joyner Morning Show, where his daily segment is heard by more than 8 million people daily across 100 stations. He's the author of multiple books, including the first, President Barack Obama's Road to the White House. He's received more than 30 awards for journalistic excellence, and he's a two-time NAACP Image Award winner. He's been named by Ebony Magazine on 3 occasions as one of the most influential African Americans in the United States. And you may also be familiar with him from his time as a contributor on CNN. In 2009, CNN was awarded the Peabody Award for Outstanding Election Coverage in 2008, of which he was a key member. Nicole Quiroga is the general manager of Telemundo in Washington, D.C. And Richmond. So she predicts market trends, sets budgets, predicts expectations, and is responsible for maintaining the stations as they grow. She's been with Telemundo for 18 years. Look forward to hearing what she has to say. Aaron Guiterman, where's Aaron? Aaron is a senior vice president, group director of Edelman's digital strategy and planning team. Aaron leads all digital initiatives in Edelman's Washington office, and he works with a team, some of whom are here today, of strategic planners, intelligence analysts, and media strategists. And they develop audience-centric digital strategies. These cut across sectors, focus on corporate reputation, as well as public affairs campaigns. And over the past 2 decades, he's guided clients through very difficult situations. He's worked with people ranging from Verizon to Miller Coors to the Business Software Alliance. He's also advised a number of political entities and corporate executives. When things get rough, you turn to Aaron and he can help you. Tiffany, where's Tiffany? Tiffany Moore with the Consumer Technology Association. She leads CTA's lobbying efforts on Capitol Hill on a host of issues that we'll hear about, but looking forward to hearing what the landscape will look like with the Trump administration and what that means for technology. Before CTA, she was a principal of Moore Consulting, and she worked with Twin Logic Strategies. And she's been working in this sector for more than 20 years. She's a native of Detroit, Michigan. And then Nathan Daschle. So Nathan is going to moderate this panel. He's the president and COO of the Daschle Group, which is a public advisory firm. He's also an advisor of Phone to Action, so we're thrilled that Nathan's here today. He previously served as the executive vice president at Clear Channel Media, where he's focusing on political advertising. He's also a startup founder himself, created the business Ruckus, which is a content management system for political campaigns. From 2007 to 2010, he was the executive director of the Democratic Governors Association. And he managed the budget there and deployed resources. We're thrilled to have this panel and look forward to what you have to say. Thank you for joining.
Well, thank you so much, Jeb, for the introduction. Thank you all of you for being here this morning. And thank you to Phone to Action. As Jeb has mentioned, I've known Jeb and Jimena for several years. Phone to Action, I think I remember having a conversation with them at the early stages. And as somebody who spent a fair amount of time in politics and technology space, I think it's absolutely amazing what they've built with this company. There aren't many companies that do political tech that have taken off and been as widely adopted as Phone to Action. So it really is a testament to these two leaders and the entire company, and I know there's several people here. It really is a testament to everything that you've built, and I hope you feel very, very proud of it. So as Jeb mentioned, I'm at a firm called the Daschle Group. One of my colleagues, Dan Jones, is here. One of the things that we do, or at least we did until last week, is we gave people political intelligence, which would be our analysis of what's going on. And the reason I'm the moderator, not on the panel, is because I have no idea what I'm talking about, obviously. I have none of the answers. Just so you know, the last political intelligence briefing that I gave one of our clients, I essentially said Trump had a 1 in a million chance of winning. So I'm part of the problem, but I think we have panelists here who are part of the solution. So what we're going to do is, I think, spend a little bit of time talking about what happened, because I think it's probably as surprising to all of you as it was to me, just from a political science point of view. Just empirically, I think the results were surprising to a lot of people. But there are a lot of mysteries in there. There are a lot of things that I think we can shed some light on and unpack a little bit. Then I want to spend a little bit of time talking about where we're going to go and what this means, because that's obviously, I think, the most important part of this important transition in our country. And what I hope all of you will do is, as we go, what I'd like to do is just bring in your questions as they arise. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and if we can maintain a good tempo, then we'll just kind of call you in and bring you into the discussion as your questions arise. But I wanted to start with the panel with something of an experiment. I want to ask you a question at the very, very beginning of this, and then maybe we can revisit again at the end and just see if our answers are any different. And the question is one of my specialties. It's sort of trite. But I want to ask you, because in 2008, when President Obama was elected, I think a lot of us thought that we were going to change politics forever. Maybe we have, maybe we haven't. Trump's election has been a seismic shift in the political industry. And what I want to ask you, and you can just give a brief answer because we'll go back to it later, is has politics changed forever? Ron, why don't we start with you and we'll just go down the line.
Let me first by saying thank you, Phone to Action, Nathan and Jimena, for the opportunity to be here. And I'm certainly, too, I like yourself, Nathan, I'm looking forward to some engaging conversation here. And again, it's almost, I think, all of us in this room, we look at what we thought we knew, and it's certainly time to revisit. I mean, what the Cubs won the World Series.
The wheels have come off.
Apple's annual revenues are, the lowest they've ever been in 15 years. And then we've had this election. So I don't know if forever should be in our vocabulary for now. I think maybe, death and taxes, probably, outside of those. More to come, more to come.
All right, Roland. 2 weeks, the week before the election, Jim Warren wrote a column, U.S. News and World Report, and he asked a bunch of us, what would you like to know today about next Tuesday? And I said to him, I said, Jim, I've been saying this for months, that no one can measure what will happen if you have a stampede to the ballot box of angry white folks. I've been saying that for months. Because in 2009, after the election of President Barack Obama, John Avlon and I were at CNN, we were waiting to go on the air, and I said, John, said, prepare yourself because we are in the beginning stages of white minority resistance. And so he wrote the book, of course, We Ain't Nuts, and we begin to talk about that. See, you got to look at this thing in a different way. And I know folks don't want to actually deal with some of these harsh realities, but 30, 40 years ago, say 30 years ago, we all were told America's going to be a majority minority country. We went, I'm going to be dead. That's so damn long. Whatever. And all of a sudden, we kept living. And all of a sudden, white people stopped having babies. Just fact. African Americans continue to have children. Latinos continue to have children. What was 2060 became 2057, 2052, and it kept dropping. Now we're at the point where there will be no majority group by 2044. All of a sudden, we saw in more than a dozen states, the average age 15 and younger were people of color. Last year, the first time in American history, 51% of all kids in public schools were black or brown. All of a sudden, I said, John, there's going to be a power shift because there's going to be fear. Go back and read Pat Buchanan's columns from 2009, 2010. He literally wrote a column where he said, I'm fearful of what's going to happen, and I hope black people don't treat us like we treated them. And people are like, Pat's a crank. Understand, when you talk about what has shifted, there's a power shift. There's a culture shift. Because we are moving away from being a white dominant culture. 1976, 89% of the electorate was white. This year was 70%. The next election will be the first time in history it falls below 70%. And so what is deeply embedded in that is, how are we changing? What so many folks in the media and pollsters never wanted to confront, when you ask the question, or make the question, when you hear Make America Great Again, what do you think about? Many white Americans thought about time growing up, mom didn't work, dad worked, house, how life was, manufacturing job, things were wonderful. But we didn't ask the flip side, what was it like for black folks then? Or if you were Jewish, or Latino, or if you were a woman. And so that conjured up something in us. And so when we begin to break this thing down, we have to confront, what does it actually mean? And so now we're sort of left with, wait a minute, there's this dynamic. I saw the dynamic in Texas when Latinos rose up and all of a sudden they said, we want a Latino superintendent. Black folks said, well, hell, we just got a black superintendent. So African Americans were saying, we just finally were able to maximize our power. You're seeing this happening. And we have to deal with it. And too many mainstream media outlets are not dealing with it because, frankly, their executive suite look just like middle America. So they even can't deal with it.
Mm-hmm. All right, you touched on a lot of points I think we're going to get to in this discussion.
Don't just drop the grenade at the outset.
Can I go again?
No, not yet. All right, Aaron, jump in.
I can talk for a while if anyone knows me, but I can't follow up with that. So I'm going to take a completely different tact, okay? So we saw the tea leaves back in August when Quinnipiac's poll came out in the New York Times, or the article came out, where they were having issues, okay, from a respondent level data standpoint of getting millennials to answer the questionnaires and pick up the phone and fulfill their sampling, okay? That was the first signal that I knew, and my team knew, that the margin of error, okay, however we define it, whether it be white working class Americans in Wisconsin, uneducated or undereducated voters, or Hispanic and traditionally underserved audiences. So when you kind of look at that, okay, in August, and then you look at the data science that was conducted by both campaigns and the media environment, there was a gap between what the media narrative was online and what the polling was telling us, okay? No one addressed that gap, but if you started to look at the digital signals that were derived from search, from Twitter and social, from geographic search trends within key districts, it was overwhelmingly pro-Trump from hashtag usage, from a narrative usage, from a sentiment standpoint. The media and the campaigns never unpacked what was happening in digital, okay? So what we were anticipating was that it was going to be closer than the election called than it was, But at the end of the day, no one anticipated that middle America, if you look at the sea of red that voted for Trump from traditionally Democratic working class districts, no one anticipated, particularly the Clinton campaign, anticipated that the only socially acceptable thing in these voters' minds was to get into that voting booth and pull the lever for Trump. So when you look at the media environment and you unpack and explore the narrative that happened over the past 16 months, really, it was one-sided. Okay, it was a shoo-in. Hillary boxed out the other candidates from the Democratic Party. The media was carrying her message, and that type of vitriol and narrative that was coming out in the press actually, and the hypothesis is, inflamed the white working middle class to vote for Trump. Okay, so it had the impact that no one anticipated. So has this campaign changed politics?
Forever.
I don't think it's changed politics. I think it's changed how campaigns are going to be run, how audiences are going to be gauged at the local level in traditionally strongholds for both parties. I think that the value of the African American, Hispanic, and female vote, that level has come up dramatically, looking at the shift in demography by district. But also, look at the trust in media and the trust in politics. 3 out of 10 voters do not trust Congress, okay? The same can be made with the
3 out of 10
media
trust or
environment
don't
right
trust?
now. Pardon me? Don't trust, right? So there's now a trust gap.
Trust in mainstream media.
Correct.
There's a distinction between alternative media.
Correct. Peer-to-peer networking, okay? And the
Okay.
people you trust the most
Thank you.
are going to be people like yourself. So when we think about that, I think that the ecosystem that politics needs to operate in needs to change. But
Okay.
politics is always going to be the same.
So I'm going to count this as a not necessarily changed forever, a yes changed forever, and I'm going to count yours as a yes, even though you said no, because all those things you talked about are big changes. But
Mine's not changed forever,
okay,
but I'll further explain next
all
round.
right, Tiffany, and then Nicole.
I'll probably have to say yes for now. So if you look at the last elections, remember we were talking about soccer moms, we were talking about minority voters, we were talking about the Tea Party, and now we're talking about angry working middle class Americans. And politics is about those who engage and those who are most actively engaged, and that's what we saw in this election. Does it change forever? I think yes for now. In 3 or 4 years, the next election, will we still be talking about this demographic? Are we still talking about soccer moms and Tea Partiers? I think, again, those who showed up at the voting booth were passionate about what they believed, whether it was positive or negative. So I think yes for now, but who knows in a couple of years who the kind of new demographic of the electorate will be that dominates.
Got it.
So, so I will say yes for now as well.
All right.
I have to say, I had a whole other speech planned out for this, obviously, since we didn't know we were going to be on the panel, prior to the results. But I think what's going to happen is we're going to start to get to know our country. For me, we're just getting to know our country. This isn't really. It shouldn't be really a shock. We've been talking, all these years in groups, as we were saying,
That's a very good point.
This isn't. It is a shock in the sense of how the polls were looking and how the projections were coming to be. But this is our country, and so in that vein, I will tell you that I hope the media collectively does do its due diligence and its responsibility. But it's not all our fault. Right? I mean, we need to get to know each other and start blending these lines together. And yes, the influentials are the media and other things like music and entertainment, but we need to start speaking in the same language across the board and accepting the groups that we have not been speaking to in the past.
Okay, but what we have been speaking to them. Okay, let me. All right. What we just witnessed was the end of what is called the third Reconstruction. Now, who even knows what the first Reconstruction was? No, I'm asking the people in this room. No, I'm asking all the smart people in this room, what was the first Reconstruction? Okay, Emancipation Proclamation, 1863. Reconstruction Acts, 13, 14, 15th Amendment takes place 1865 to 1876. There's an election, 1876. It's a contested election. What happens? Democrats say, fine, you want Hayes to be president, we'll cut a deal, but you got to pull the federal troops out of the South, 3 remaining states. That's 1877, the Great Compromise. Reconstruction ends. But actually that was beginning before that, because what happened was after several years of Reconstruction amendments, you had folks in America who said, okay, you know what, we cool, we've been dealing with this for the last several years, we're pretty much tired of this. The Civil Rights Act of 1866, Civil Rights Act of 1875, 1883, the Supreme Court invalidates that act by 8-1 decision. Plessy v. Ferguson comes in 1896. You don't see another Civil Rights Act until 1957 under Eisenhower. All of a sudden, Emmett Till killed. August 28th, 1955. Montgomery starts in December 1st, 1955. That's the beginning of the second Reconstruction period. So you go through 13 years of that. Civil Rights Act in 64, Voting Rights Act in 65, Fair Housing Act in 68. King is killed April 4th, 68. Nixon is elected president. For what happened? He was talking about law and order. King writes in his book, Chaos or Community, Where Do We Go From Here, in 1967, he said, the greatest concern for me is not going to be what happens against our opponents. He said, what's going to happen with the white moderate? Those were his very words. He said, it didn't cost America much when it came to allowing us to sit in parks, to go to hotels. He said, the question is, will America now write that particular much larger check? The end of the second Reconstruction that takes place after that with the election of Nixon. 2008, Obama gets reelected. Media, oh, post-racial America. I'm going, y'all might want to wake the hell up. You come now 2016, Trump gets elected. When you begin to listen to the phrasing, he said things that people said, oh my God, that will disqualify him. The whole deal with Senator John McCain, POW. His supporters were saying, he's saying stuff I've always wanted to say, and forget political correctness. And we bought into those things. We thought that thing, all that sort of stuff ended. History teaches us all of these different things. You saw Black Lives Matter. You saw people who were saying, okay, what are these folks doing? What's going on in the streets? You saw the whole deal when it comes to illegal immigrants as well. You have seen this in American history. The issue is not, and this is the mistake that we're making. We're having a conversation right now, racist, not racist. See, that's not the conversation. Because when you say you're racist, not racist, then that ends up being a whole conversation. I'm not a racist or you are racist. No, what's all things happening in between that? How are we feeling? What are our thoughts about these very things? What's driving that? We're concerned about, we talk about an American way of life, there's this fear we're losing that. What does that even mean? What is an American way of life? Oh, but these are our values. Okay, what are our values? Because your values growing up in Iowa are different from my values growing up in Houston. We're right now having a conversation about white working class voters in the Midwest. I can still smell the work boots of my dad and the jeans and the hard hat, and I lived in Houston. He worked for Amtrak. So if you have people who are in the inner city, who are not white, who have the exact same economic angst as white middle class workers in the Midwest, how did they vote different than that white worker in the Midwest, if both of them had economic angst? See, that's the nuance that we don't want to deal with, and so we have now rushed headlong into, oh my God, let's see what's happening in Wisconsin, and Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and Ohio, but the same concerns are literally happening in Chicago, in St. Louis, in Houston, in Dallas, but they're done in a different way. We have to deal with how our history informs us to where we are. And what there is fear that America is changing what I have known. And this last point, 2000, and this would change it for me. 2009, Obama gets inaugurated. I think it was Pew dropped their poll, and the question was this: are you optimistic about the future of America for your children? Every group, a majority, said I am, except one. White Americans, African Americans, Latinos, Asians, all said, I'm optimistic about the future of America for my children, except one group. When I saw that poll, I said, we got a problem. And you're going to see it over the next, forget 8 years. We are now about to be in a real battle for 30, 40, 50 years, because the America that we have known for the previous 3 centuries is changing, and folks are saying, I don't know what this world is not going to look like, and I'm concerned. And someone comes along who represented thoughts, feelings, and viewpoints, and they said, that's my man.
So this is, I think these responses are fascinating, because what they tell me is that there are a lot of things going on in this country that we're not, until now, even starting to pick up. Nicole, you said something that I thought was interesting, which is, and there actually was, for those of you who saw it, a Saturday Night Live skit to this effect over the weekend, which is some people were surprised by the results and some people were not surprised. And it's really, really, I think, interesting about the different currents in our country. But what I want to do is go a little bit more technical for the start, because from phone to action, a lot of us in this room, we work in the industry of politics. So we've talked about a lot of the social trends that are going on and shaping this. But what I'm curious about, and maybe Aaron, we can start with you, is I'm curious about what we all collectively did wrong to not know that this was going on. Because in politics, people pay us to read the electorate. They pay us to put together strategy that's going to win races. And one side won, one side lost, but a lot of us did not see this outcome coming. So what did we do wrong from a data perspective?
So let me layer on top of all of the,
Layer away.
on top of a lot of the comments that were made up here. It's absolutely critical that we look at the cultural dynamics that are fueled by our economy moving from an industrial economy to an innovation economy, okay? That movement from labor to intellectual capital, okay, has created a divide between the haves and the have-nots that is getting wider. It's not getting shorter, okay? So when you look at technological innovation and those who have benefited from it, okay, urban areas, intellectual capitals, bi-coastal, some Midwest and rural communities have also benefited by innovators setting up shop in those towns, okay? So the other side of that coin is those who have not benefited from that technological shift are they look at stories in the media, they look at the politicians that are elected to represent them, and they say, that is not the lifestyle that I see every day. Goldman Sachs did a study 2 years ago called the two-speed economy, okay, where the key point of this incredibly complex study was the recovery that boardrooms are experiencing is not the same recovery my living room and my house is experiencing. So there's a dichotomy we need to recognize that's fueled, okay, by digital. So when we look at the voting population, and what did we get wrong? It was staring us right in the face and everyone dismissed it. The polling ecosystem, okay, and the research ecosystem that everyone's been trained on is broken, okay? The multimodal methodologies that we use to solicit feedback from constituencies miss incredible swaths of individuals from underserved communities, from minority communities, from white working class communities, because people's behavior has changed. We have not fixed the model that we employ for research to get those people who don't have landlines, who have moved away from traditional media, who are on social, who are exploring and consuming content on demand, okay? So we have done nothing as a community, whether it be in the research or in the media community or in the punditry, to compensate and fill that void. Okay, now data science, I love that data science is on trial, because data science and data patterning cannot predict human behavior, okay? What it can do, it can cluster and analyze individual actions after the fact, okay? So you can get a predictive curve on where trends are going, okay? Everyone got the math wrong because the inputs fueling that math were off, okay? If your root data is not accurate, your end result is going to be off. Now, before the election, I wrote an article, and I got it wrong, but I said that Real Clear Politics poll, and I looked at all the states, okay, was the margin of error was 1.7% between a 5-point deficit between Clinton and Trump, okay? And I originally anticipated, through all the data that we went through, that 1.7, that margin of error, was going to be African American communities, Hispanics, Asian Americans, okay, and women voters, okay? I did not anticipate the groundswell of support from traditionally Democratic strongholds to have the white middle class vote so vociferously for Trump, okay? So the modeling standpoint is, what do we get wrong? We need to change the way we communicate and engage with constituencies and respondents in research so that we are controlling for the way technology is changing how humans consume content and shape their opinions. Because like I said, there's a trust gap between the population, like the general public, and the informed elite, and Congress and the media. So we need to control for that.
I want to hear from Ron. I know Ron's got a couple things to say.
I'd like to take a quick pause here on a couple things. You know, two terms and two words we're hearing today, we and media. These are two terms that I think we need to kind of peel back a little bit on we. Because, let's start with media first. So media, we could segment media into digital, local, national, and I think it's even time to segment into individual networks. Couple things, and because of when you look at the Latino vote here, we broke records. We had record turnouts, and we being the Latino community. We may be as high as 14.7 million in our voter turnout this year. And keep in mind, in 2012, we were 11.2. This is huge. We knew this. Univision knew this. Our community knew this because we started our Vota por tu America, Vote for Your America, nonpartisan campaign over just about a year and a half ago, doing experiments and primaries, not just in the battleground states. We were focusing on California and Texas, along with Florida and other states, even Georgia, we were doing this. So if you all recall, in the weekend leading up to the election on November 8th, what was the headlines? What were they talking about on major networks? Latino vote, early turnout. No surprise to us. So as we dig deeper into this conversation, I want to urge us all to look back and to see how we're categorizing everything, because the we, I don't think that's another term. I think, Nathan, we're going to take a hard look and see what constitutes we and moving forward.
I want to introduce Zach Moffatt, who just joined. He's the co-founder of Targeted Victory, and he was Romney's digital director. Thank you, Zach.
So, Zach, we were just talking about trying to figure out, in retrospect, what we got wrong. What would we do better? And I mean, I say we as people who work in politics, who are observers of politics, just regardless of who you supported, just because the results surprised everyone in so many different ways. So one of the things we talked about was polling and what were kind of lessons we could learn from that. And I was going to follow up with Aaron, but maybe, Zach, I can ask you this. It seems like we had particularly hard time this year predicting the turnout model. And so Aaron was talking about our ability to reach people in polling, which is important. But of course, it only matters if you have the right turnout model. Is there something unique about this election that made it harder to predict who was going to turn out?
I mean, I'm not sure. Harder to predict who was going to turn out. Obviously, for all of us it was, because everyone's model was off, right? Like, it didn't seem to matter. I mean, I saw pretty much everything on the Republican side, and anyone who told you they knew this was going to happen based upon data is not telling the truth, right? Like, that's just by definition. It doesn't mean that there weren't people who thought there was something that they were kind of inferring from what they saw that gave them a greater confidence level, and they also thought, but I mean, we went through this in 2012. We thought there's this silent majority that was going to come in 2012 that didn't turn up, apparently, so as we went through the process. I do think that it goes to a larger point that we're going to have to look at of like what type of feedback is there. I mean, we saw this, it's funny, in the primary with the Cruz campaign, so we were part of the Cruz campaign, that we actually were very, very consistent with our ability to kind of project what we thought, even in a race with Donald Trump involved and all these other candidates. And I think that that's kind of a testament to the degree that Chris Wilson and the team there on the predictive analytics side was actively involved and willing to invest in giving feedback, 30,000 calls every night, the feedback loop that let them be more accurate as they went through. I think the larger point is, in DC, we all kind of believe everything's like about the knockout, whether it's in advocacy, whether it's in campaigns, it's like there's this one blow that will take it down. And I think what Donald Trump and social media has proven is like the new era is who can jab the best and who can jab on a continuous basis and kind of wear people down. And then what are the outcomes as a result of that? Because how many times did we read like, this is it, both in the primary and the general, and the models would come back and then they'd start to kind of correct the meme as we went through it. And I think that was what we saw a lot of, is that, we went into election day because we had the wrong assumptions in 2012 as well. We were off by, we were saying people, if you were a 7 of 10 voter on the enthusiasm level, we were going to win. Unfortunately, people who were 4 of 10 behaved like 7 of 10s, and that changed the composition. I think that was almost inverted this time. I think some of the from the Clinton folks and the Trump folks were assuming certain people would turn out who just at scale didn't. I mean, we had 20 more million people eligible to vote in 2016, and there may be only about 4 million more votes that are cast as it goes through when everything's counted. And then you take 8 million out for the fact of third-party candidates. People are turning out, but like the composition looked different, but we didn't scale as we have in 8 and 12, and that has a massive impact on this election.
There are two other areas in terms of the broader question of what we did wrong that I wanted to explore, and they're both related to the polling as well. One of them is, one of the other things that surprised everyone was how, relatively speaking, well Trump did with minority voters. None of us saw that coming either. We all thought that he was going to get crushed. And then somewhat relatedly, I wanted to ask the panel, but let's take these in steps, but where I'm going to go in the second thing is whether there is an elitist bias in the mainstream media and whether we all kind of fell prey to that. That's the story that came out of Brexit, the story that came out of Colombia, and people were talking about it in advance of this election. But you know, you all remember Huffington Post refused to, for a while, cover Trump in its political section, covering him in entertainment news. And that's a pretty strong editorial move. But there are a lot of probably less obvious examples. So, but let's start with the first, which is, and I'll just open it to the whole panel. Who's shocked that Trump did as well as he did with minority voters?
Let me
Ron?
just start saying I disagree with the statement that he did well with minority voters. As we just heard, the issues and a lot of the I think the incorrectness of the media, and I say media of some of the, again, more of some of the traditional media, major networks. We are still, the Latino community has documentation that the actual support for Trump is 18, maybe 19%, where a research firm who admitted to being wrong in their research that reported at 29%, which all the media, I mean, again, ran with. So
this gets us maybe to the second question.
This is completely layered into the conversation of what we need to address right here. So I want to throw that out there. Latino Decisions is the research company. There's documentation. There's PDF files that they've done. They did, exhaustive research data in deep in South Texas, California, Florida, and those numbers, believe me, folks, are legit. They match up to Univision's own research. When we did this year-and-a-half campaign, we knew that those numbers are going to be, less than 20%, 18%. So I just want to say that again.
So we
before
might have
move this
another
conversation going
contemporary example of both flawed polling methodology and inaccuracies in the media.
So first, your question, you stated, folks were shocked how well he did with minorities. So let me separate black. It's not the issue is not Trump all of a sudden did great with black voters. It's Hillary Clinton underperformed with black voters. What Donald Trump first. So here's the piece, and I specifically made this point to the Hillary Clinton people, which I also made clear to the RNC as well. 2012, there was a 9-point difference between black women and black men for Obama. 9 points in 12, because black men did not feel as if Obama was doing enough for them. 2016, 13% of black men voted for Trump, 4% of black women voted for Trump. 9 points. I told the Clinton people on September 17th, y'all might want to send black men and go talk to black men because you're getting your ass kicked. Okay, fine. You want to listen? I've only been black 48 years. That's exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm.
John Kasich got 14% of the black male vote in his re-election bid for governor of Ohio. The numbers were sitting right there. And so a lot of African-American men felt Obama did not do enough on the issue of the economy. It was sitting right there for folks. They didn't pay attention. The Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies, probably the most prominent black think tank in the country, look, the numbers show black voters 65 plus at 97% absolutely voting. Clinton was targeting those people. 18 to 34 was at 76%. Of the percentage who said, I'm not going to vote, 18 to 34 black was at 18%. They were the only group that was in double digits. Okay, she had a problem. Super predator comment, lack of speaking to black millennials. It was sitting right there. They were not, I was in Ohio and North Carolina the last 2 weeks of the election, and I'm talking to first-time millennial voters, and it was like, yeah, shit, yeah, I voted. Damn, I didn't. That was their reaction on camera. And so it was sitting right there, and so what happened is she got fewer votes. What is all these folks, oh, we got it wrong. No one anticipated that just, I'm not feeling her. And let me throw this out right now real quick for all these Bernie people who need to shut the hell up, okay?
What do you really think?
No, because I'm tired of them too. Bernie Sanders had the exact same damn problem in the primary. Okay, you can have Killer Mike, you can talk to Cornel West all you want to, but Bernie Sanders didn't ignore black voters leading up until South Carolina. He ignored black voters. Tom Joyner Morning Show is the largest urban morning show in America. For 6 months, we could not get Bernie Sanders to come on. When Bernie Sanders finally decided to come on, they agreed to come on, then they called back and say, hey, he's in the West, it's too early, we're gonna cancel. I went on Twitter to my 1.4 million followers, blasted him canceling. Ben Jealous called back, say, man, we're gonna do it, could you please tweet that out? That's what Bernie Sanders did. I have the only national show that targets African Americans. I said, when do you wanna come on? A whole hour. Hillary said yes, Ben Carson said yes. He never did it for 6 months. So it was sort of the same thing, not speaking directly to those voters, assuming, oh, you'll pick it up along the way. And so all of these things came in. The Clinton campaign literally said this, oh, we want to get black female voters, we'll keep advertising on Ellen. I'm sorry. Come again? So not TV One, not OWN, not Bounce TV. No, that's a fact. That's a fact. The Clinton campaign also hired a white grassroots, a white controlled firm to handle grassroots organizing. I'm sorry, you cannot send white folks into black neighborhoods and HBCU campuses and somehow think they're gonna maximize turnout. They would not hire black firms who specialize in this, or Latino firms who specialize in this. And I'll get to this later, this whole idea, white Democrats and progressives, they gotta do some soul searching because they can't talk about income inequality when they practice it. And this is also as part of this issue here. Trump won Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania by 55,000 votes. Take every other thing here, take every other issue. Had they factored that in, she still would have won. And just the last point, your models were all off because you did not factor in voter suppression. You did not factor in the shaving off. You didn't factor in cross-check. You didn't factor in 300,000 people in Wisconsin, how it impacted by the voter ID. You didn't factor in 70% of black people voting in the first week of early voting in North Carolina. They reduced to only one early voting site in every county. Same thing in Ohio. 2 weeks before the election, only 4 hours of early voting on Sunday. 6 hours on the final weekend, sold to the polls on Sunday. All of these posters are running around trying to figure out what happened to black turnout because there's been a direct assault on black voters since 2010 due to voter suppression because of the turnout in 2008. If you can keep ignoring voter suppression, your models are going to keep being wrong.
All right, so that there's a lot in there, and that's those are some excellent points that I want to get to again. Passion is a great thing. What I want to do to follow up on that point, but we can bring this in discussion later, is next time what do we do? How do we take that into account next time so that we're not misreading the poll numbers? But and so maybe we can kind of address as we go on. Ron has some really interesting slides that I want to share about where we go from here, which is kind of a good segue. But before I do, Tiffany, you work in business, and Nicole works in media. But is there anything? This conversation has been kind of guy-dominated for a little bit, so I want to just give you the chance to throw in anything that, if you have any perspectives on what we missed, we as political observers, on the vote, on turnout patterns, or anything else that kind of led us to misread this election.
I'll just actually, I looked at all the polls you all did and went by them, and I think generally the business community in Washington and looked at those models and said, okay, this is what's going to happen. So to your point, yes, obviously there's some correction that needs to go on, but that's intelligence that we rely on. But obviously, again, we missed a lot of the electorate and what was going on.
And I'll just say, speaking in the way of media, I can't believe that we haven't already learned our lesson from past elections in what was said here. You can't just speak to the general public and assume that you can't translate your messages directly to the Latino voter. In this case, I say Latino, and this goes across, minority groups. But I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people that simply said, you know what, it's just enough for us to, maybe put somebody that looks like a Latino or that is somehow, will recall that, that memory from the audience. We don't have to translate it into Spanish. And if that would have been done, and I can't believe it, we already learned from the last election that was necessary to do. Yes, we broke record numbers as Latino voters, but we could have done so much more. Had the conversation, had the resources, had the people in both camps taken the time and the courtesy, quite frankly, to take us seriously. And it could have been moved to either party. They could have made a difference. And so that whole conversation of not translating and speaking to your constituents, the people that you want to move their action. When I'm speaking Spanish, it's not Spanglish, it's Spanish. It boggles my mind, and I do hope that in the future this can be taken seriously finally.
So actually, before we even get to Ron's slides, because this is such an important part of the discussion, and to sort of encapsulate the most recent example is, I referenced some exit polls on Trump's performance, and which is what the mainstream media had reported, and Ron gives us some really strong evidence that these exit polls, which is what we always use to measure these things, are way off. So clearly we have a problem institutionally on how we gather the data, how we process the data and analyze it, and then how we report it through media channels. But what I want to do is actually just take this moment to see if anyone in the audience has any questions about these important topics before we go on to kind of projecting ahead. Don't be shy. Okay. Oh, yes.
First of all, thank you for Phone to Action. Thank you to Phone to Action for having this. I'm going to stand up.
Now no one's going to ask questions if they have to stand up. There we go.
My question has to do with, with voter turnout in general. Having learned in college and grad school about low voter turnout in the United States versus other countries, and having an election day be on a Saturday, or have a national holiday for the election day, or having automatic voter registration where every citizen's automatically registered, and how those are contribute to higher voter turnout. Do you think that had anything to do with that? And do you think it's still based on the race card, that a lot of politicians don't have the incentive to put those measures in place because those measures would help the minority voter more than the white voter?
Well, I would say to understand low voter turnout, you need to go pull and read the federal court's ruling of what happened in North Carolina. North Carolina is the 21st century Alabama. Let's be real clear. North Carolina was ground zero for voter suppression. The federal appeals court, they ruled that there was a laser-like targeting of black voters. Republicans in North Carolina literally asked in emails, when did black people vote? And they tailored a bill to specifically suppress the votes. It's in the federal ruling. They said 70% vote the first week. Cool, we're gonna limit early voting. Guilford County, there was 16 early voting locations in 2012. The first week of early voting, there was 1 this year. Then they said they vote on Sunday. Cool, end Sunday voting. The governor was a Republican. He controlled the state board of elections, which means they control the local board of elections. After the federal ruling, they sent a letter to every election board. They said, you can just follow the law. You can limit. The chair in Mecklenburg County, Charlotte, proposed let's only have 1 early voting site in all of Mecklenburg County. That's 900,000 people, 1 site. Ohio actually did it. I was in Ohio 2 weeks before the election. Summit County, where Akron, I was speaking to the NAACP, they only had 1 early voting location. The entire county for 4 hours. The last Sunday, 6 hours. I went to Cuyahoga County, where Cleveland is. Only one early voting location. In North Carolina, they moved early voting sites off of all college campuses. Duke moved. North Carolina has the most HBCUs in the country. Folks who don't know, historically black colleges and universities. Remove them from all of the campuses. The clerk at the University of Wisconsin Green Bay admitted that she moved the early voting location off of that campus because they're going to vote Democrat. It was sitting right there. And all of a sudden, national mainstream media decides to cover voting suppression the final damn weekend of the election. Where, folks, we've been covering it since 2010. This has been a targeted effort because this was all it was about. Shave 5,000 here, 10,000 here, 5,000 here, move it from an accessible site to a way out in the boondock site with limited parking because we're going to make it difficult. Not that we're going to stop them from voting. We want to put as many barriers as possible to make it harder and less accessible. And what happened in North Carolina? Turnout was down. That's why Obama, Michelle Obama, the president, Hillary Clinton, they kept going back to North Carolina because they would drive that up. They knew exactly what they were doing. And that's what I'm talking about here that was missed. And same thing with Latinos in Texas. They kept in Bexar County, San Antonio, yes. They kept the signs up in the voting locations what they require for the voter ID even after the federal court ruled take the signs down.
And let's take this to the West Coast. So show of hands, Los Angeles, we're very familiar with LA DMA, right? You know where they only had one location for early voting. And for those of you who are familiar with LA, it was in Norwalk, California. Norwalk, California, for the Los Angeles dominant market area.
Hold up, they have public transportation out there?
That is,
There you go.
Yes.
You move it to a
Yes,
place,
there's
no public
another area.
transportation. You can't take a subway or a bus. This is all by this. These were all legal measures, all by design.
And one other point we haven't, and just again to piggyback off of Roland's comments, the first election in 50 years without the full protection of the Voter Rights Act.
First time.
I mean, this list is getting longer and longer. Nathan.
So, Ron, why don't we use this opportunity to go to your slides and some of the demographic trends that
absolutely.
we should pay attention to?
Absolutely. Well, before I preface this, Jimena, what's that disclaimer when you're watching a show like on a sci-fi channel? Material may be unfit for certain audiences. Let's jump right to the map here, okay? I could talk and you can hear all day about the Latino community, Latino voter turnout and such. But this right here graphic and the next one, but let's stay with this one, captures it all. Look at the population increases, or increased in our country from 2000 to 2013. But look at the increase specifically for those of you who live in the Southeast or have family and friends in the Southeast, triple-digit increase of population growth. Look at Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky. You can't see that from afar, but I will say Georgia, 127% Latino population increase. Alabama, 207%. And then you got Tennessee, 191%. Next slide, please, Jimena. This does not go away. It continues for the next 10 years. So when we talk about efforts, the future of the Latino vote, or this country's vote for that matter, you have to take in consideration, in fact, the numbers and the population growth. And this is just the Latino growth. There's other neighborhoods and other communities, Asians, that are also kind of mirroring this, obviously not at the same degree. But this really sets up the narrative here, folks. This is the narrative. So when we talk about the future, we have this. So what our campaign showed, and the first slide was the campaign Vote for Your America. It was bilingual because Univision, another fact, we are no longer just a Spanish language media company. Again, some of you know we acquired The Onion. We have The Root, African American Portal. We have Gizmodo and Fusion and such, among others, El Rey Network. So we too recognize that this country is a multicultural community that continues to grow. So I'm going to go through real quick what we did in technology, because this was something that we talked about leading up to the election. How are our campaigns, how are companies, how are groups incorporating technology? So again, we had our traditional on-air assets. with PSAs and PSAs and using our talent. The online, we created 2 unique digital tools, a text platform. I know you all know the open rate. What is it? 98% of us open and read our text within 3 minutes of receiving. Okay, 87% of Hispanic adults text. Okay, so again, we went into the text business here, and happy to say that a lot of our community partners and others in this campaign are doing the same thing as well. We created a bilingual digital election guide with sample ballots for folks to kind of come in and review in culturally relevant message and copy. So it's not, I don't know about you all, but I've been voting all my life, almost 50 years or so, almost 50 years, and I still trip up some of these ballots. Especially those of you from California. You look at the prop list there. It's you need a chair and a lazy boy just to kind of sit back and read all those ballots. So we broke it down there and made it easily to digest, easy to understand to the best we could. And again, combined with our local phone banks, our events, we had over 300,000 folks in various communities attend, open again to the entire community, not just the Latino community. And I'm happy to say, I'm not going to speculate on any numbers because I can't just stand here and say about the polls, but I will say this 14.7 million or this 14 million Latino voter turnout matches our numbers. And with the numbers and the map that I showed earlier, you can just imagine what you can expect in terms of future Latino vote and voter engagement efforts from campaigns.
Excellent. So this is, I think, a good chance to really get into the what are we going to expect going forward part of the conversation. I thought we would look at this from the standpoint of political parties, standpoint of media, and also the standpoint of governing. And Zach, I want to ask your perspective on this. Donald Trump, by my calculation, I could be wrong, but I think it's true that there's only one Republican nominee, one living Republican presidential nominee who endorsed Trump, who's Bob Dole. So I think that's a pretty amazing stat. And yet now he's the head of the party. What do you think this means for the Republican Party and political parties in general?
I mean, I think that's what's going to be seen, right? Like the question will be, how does he work within the construct of? I mean, I think he had by the end a strong working relationship with the RNC, obviously, as we went through. And then we saw also with the NRSC and the NRCC in a lot of the districts, a lot of the Senate candidates actually ran ahead of Donald Trump as it relates to their races. I mean, races that broke open at the end, Ron Johnson, others as we went through. The question is, does Donald Trump take some things away from President Obama? And I saw that they're considering an OFA type organization outside of the structure, and what does that look like? I do think that what we see is just the way the laws are written, the committees have a huge amount of value just because of how they can raise the dollars, how they can coordinate, what's legal as they go through the process. At the end of the day, structure matters. And I think that that's what we have to look at. I mean, how Donald Trump takes over the party, it is his party now. I mean, he is going to pick the next chairman, and he is, the president of the United States. He is the head of our party as it goes through. And then the question will be what legislation is passed, how does the Freedom Caucus react to that, how do the other components, I mean, now that you're in charge, you have to govern, it's going to get a lot harder. Campaigning is like the easy part of what we've got to go through, right? And so now it's going to be a question of how do you bring all these pieces together as we move through it. And I mean, that is what I think what we're all grappling with right now, because we don't really even know the level of commitment that the Trump campaign wants to make to owning and controlling the party as it goes through. I'm more fascinated in watching it from the left because there's been this uneasy alliance that's been kind of held together by President Obama's team. And now that that has broken, where is the leadership going to come from, right? Like, at least we kind of know who we answer to. You can choose to go in a different direction. Watching the left is actually going to be the fascinating component for us for the next 2 years because, I mean, you have to move back elections, so who's going to be a leader within the House? You're going to have to move back who's going to be, now it's going to be contentious for the DNC. The tension is there, and I think we saw it on both sides. I mean, whether it's Bernie Sanders or Senator Cruz or others, there was this underlying tension throughout this entire cycle of 2016, and it's all starting to bubble up now, and I think that the structures of the committees are going to be where a lot of those battles are fought as we go through this. Yeah,
you make an excellent point, because I remember in the conventions this summer, everyone was predicting that there's going to be chaos at the Republican convention. And then as we got closer, we were like, oh, wait a minute, the chaos might be at the Democratic convention. And then just the same, all fall, we were talking about this huge rift in the Republican Party, and this they'd called the GOP Civil War. And then it turns out after election that it might be the Democratic Party that is going to really struggle with an identity crisis going forward. I would bet every penny I have, which is not many, that we have opinions on this panel about what the future of the Democratic Party is. And we're obviously going to go through that right now. The future of the DNC, but also all the leadership positions. For the panel, and also again keep also the following fact in mind, that normally the party out of power picks up seats in that first midterm election, but the Senate map is really, really tough for Dems in 2018. So that is a massive additional complication for whoever takes over the party. But I would love to hear any opinions on where the Democratic Party should go. Okay, Roland, I know you do. I know you have an opinion, Roland.
I was deferring. I was deferring.
No one can say he never deferred. I saw you.
I
You
was
physically
deferring.
deferred.
First of all, we have to be honest about something. Where the Democratic Party is right now, and nobody likes to do this because they just love them to death, you have to put this firmly at the feet of President Barack Obama. The greatest failure that he has made was gutting the Democratic National Committee for Organizing for America. I've been told this by senior administration officials, people who worked on the campaign, who also worked in this White House. He did not care about the DNC. That is your 50-state strategy. OFA went from Obama for America to Organizing for America. He literally shifted resources and people to OFA and left the party stranded. After 2012, they actually took his campaign debt and moved it over to the DNC, which is one of the reasons they had to take out a loan in 2013. They were operating from behind since 2013. And so he has to own what he did not do. He was a leader of the party. He picked Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz to be the DNC chair. Even after 2012, when people were telling him to replace her leading to the election, he did not do it. And so we can dance around here. People love President Obama, especially black people, but you have to think that this goes beyond your 8 years. So he's campaigning, talking about protect my legacy. That's what the party is. There was a problem there. Anybody who was a Democrat, Scott Walker beat back the unions twice in Wisconsin. How they did not see 2016 is unbelievable. I have no idea. So where do they move forward? First of all, you can't start trying to pick your candidate in 2020 right now, because hell, no one knew where Obama came from in 2008 because he ran for the Senate in 2004. You have to allow that to happen. They need this particular fight right now, even when it comes to delaying their elections in the House right now. Democrats have to be thinking not 2018, they have to be thinking 2020, because 2020, that election is critical because it's gerrymandering. See, where they got so excited in 2008, forgot the census after 2010 election, who wins number of legislatures, controls now gerrymandering. Understand, 16 state legislatures flipped in 2010. You now have 31 Republican governors. It just picked off McCrory in North Carolina. What the Democrats should do is actually go talk to Reverend Dr. William Barber in North Carolina and look at what he has been doing with Moral Mondays. Moral Mondays started off as 16 people protesting in North Carolina Capitol, largely African American. Then all of a sudden this thing began to grow and grow. All of a sudden, whites in North Carolina began to realize that not expanding Medicaid in North Carolina shut down rural hospitals. All of a sudden, this is what Barber told me. He said, Roland, he said he was at a parade. A white guy walks up to them with a Confederate flag draped around his neck in tears saying, Reverend Barber, I know you with the NAACP. I don't like the NAACP, but I got to thank you for fighting for our hospital. This was a white man with a Confederate flag talking to the head of the NAACP, who was a black preacher. And so you have those issues there. So you have Republicans in states who are taking positions that are impacting folks who are also non-black. People got to go back and also study Reverend Jackson's campaigns in 84, 88. He went to West Virginia with Willie Nelson. He was talking to folks in Iowa. Democrats are going to literally have to go talk to places in America and tell white folks who are broke, you broke and they broke. Broke is broke. That's part of the issue. You have white Americans who broke don't realize they broke. Mm-hmm. They actually think they might get to stay in Donald Trump hotel.
Right now?
They can't even walk through a Donald Trump hotel. And so Democrats, so you're going to see this fight that gets back to its core, but you have individuals who have created movements. The reason McCrory is not governor It's because of Moral Mondays. But that was built up over a 3 and 4 year process. The reason Ross almost beat Burr was there. You talked about Latino voters here. Democrats, or even all these billionaires, should go back and study what happened in 1960 when the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was founded at Shaw University. What they did was they invested in massive voter registration, but not sending college-educated kids with clipboards in the cities. One of the greatest organizers was Ella Baker. She told all of those SNCC students, take off your damn preppy clothes, put on some overalls, and when you go into Alabama, sit with these sharecroppers and ask them, what do you want? I'm not here to tell you what you need. What do you want? That's how they did it. When it comes to Latinos, somebody's going to have to literally fund in a massive way, and I'm talking about $50 to $100 million to go and register the 2 million eligible but unregistered Latinos in Texas. McCain wins Texas by 16 points. Romney wins Texas by 12 points. Trump only won Texas by 9 points. You had criminal justice advocates elected DA in Harris County. Clinton ran up huge numbers in Bexar County, Harris County, Dallas County, because 500,000 people are moving to Texas every single year. Texas can change. Georgia, 800,000 unregistered black and Latino voters. Trump only wins Georgia by 5 points. You have to invest where the people are. In 2020, they could literally flip Arizona, Georgia, and potentially Texas. That's real, only if they're going to invest the money. So I say stop putting your money chasing suburban white women. You put your money where you know you can turn people out. That's the map. And the question is, will they have the guts to do it, or will they stick with this same tried and true failed ass model? And if you do that, well, guess what? You're going to be in the minority rule for a long damn time.
Trending on Twitter right now,
Yeah.
failed ass model.
That's fine.
All right.
Feel free to
Zach.
speak that because I don't give a damn because they don't pay me.
There's a lot of that, obviously, to decouple as you go through it. But I think it's important also to realize that we've somehow gotten to this point where we are back at the point where certain groups have to vote a certain way. I think the takeaway for me for Hillary is her inability to have a closing argument with so many people who needed to vote for her. I mean, we were giving her all these other reasons. She was a terrible candidate. I mean, she was like truly a terrible candidate as it went through. And for whatever, she may have been a great president, a whole other component of it, but you have to run in order to win. Yeah, and as you go through it, and I think it's also, it's the same way that, you know, there's no doubt that Hispanic growth in Texas is going to be a massive rate. We all acknowledge that. There's also the reality that, you know, Greg Abbott won 50% of the Hispanic vote in 2014. Now there may be more people in presidential. We can have all these other conversations, but there are different candidates behave differently as they go through, and I think that's kind of the Obama component of it as it went through. Is that 2012 they did a lot of things right, but by winning they got to say they did everything right. It's the same way the Hillary campaign actually ran probably a fundamentally structurally like data components, like, you know, all the little tactical little things really, really well. The problem was they were terrible at a very high structural level.
Right.
But I think it's important because I remember sitting through, I mean, I've sat through every single, you know, Ford Foundation committee thing, the white voters, like, there's no way Republicans will ever win again. Like, right, like that was the narrative, and people start to believe it. You start writing about it, you start talking about it, and it's this belief that everyone kind of moves in these blocks and they have to behave a certain way. And I think the larger point is candidates have to start to talk to different groups as they go through. To me, that's a part of it. There's no difference. It's just we're lumping a lot of things together. Like, if this happens, this automatically has to be the next step. This cycle has changed.
Republicans are not going to talk to black people, so I can go ahead and say that. And I've been trying to get them to talk to black people for 20 years.
You know, I guess, you know, I may have a different opinion on that, but we'll see as we go through, right?
I've run 3 black
Actually-
newspapers. I've run 2 black networks and a black website. I'm pretty clear on this one. They're not going to talk to black people.
I don't disagree that
Okay.
you believe that.
I'm just trying to. I'm just trying to tell you. I know
right.
what I know.
All right. We have a difference of opinion there. Aaron, you wanted to jump in.
Dismiss the fact that messaging and audience matters at the local level. Okay? So at the end of the day, when we look at the past few years, I mean, we see it time and time and again in our polling and our research that we do at Edelman and related to our trust barometer. Okay? So the most trusted person coming off of 2016 study was someone like myself, okay? So being able to channel the personal values, beliefs, and behaviors of the audience that you're trying to persuade, okay, is absolutely critical. And it's not just the numbers game that we sit up here and we talk about about the data, about the voting blocks, about the constituency composition, about the districts. What we miss, and what I think both campaigns missed the mark on, was making a local connection to amplify what we are going to do with you, not for you, okay? So an interesting example that Richard Edelman and I were talking about yesterday was the fact when Donald Trump met with Ford executives at the Detroit Economic Forum, and he said to them that I am going to immediately put a 35% tariff on any cars made in Mexico imported back into the United States. Ford dismissed it, their employee base didn't, okay? So that localized, relevant messaging to those employees of Ford struck a chord, okay? Hillary had no response. When we looked at the exit polling and then the district votes on election night, it was a sea of red, right? Localized messaging is absolutely critical. So building on Zach and building what you said, we treat audiences as these monolithic blocks of individuals driven by demographics. 18 to 34, so who cares? I don't, like when we design campaigns to hit high value, hard to reach audiences, demographics are an output of the value structure that we're trying to explore. So these are the behavioral attributes and the behavioral composition of these audiences. This is what they think, feel, and behave. Oh, by the way, they're 35 to 37 males, right, that live in these districts. I don't care about demographics when we design. We care about the messaging and the messenger, how it's disseminated. Facebook and Twitter's algorithms are fantastic, right, because they're designed, and Google, to serve you the content that you consume on a regular basis, okay? So if you're trying to steal share, and the presidential race is like the epitome of a brand share war, I need to get 50.1% of the Electoral College vote. And there's no new market. Actually, the market, if we look at this in brand marketing, the political market is shrinking. You're in a highly competitive share war in a shrinking market. How do I get votes? I'm not going to get them by talking at people. I'm going to get them by talking with people. But more importantly, who are they? Okay? So audience segmentation, when we talk about like the Hispanic vote, the African American vote, the middle class white vote, what does that mean? Okay, because the Hispanic, my wife is from Castilla y León, Spain, and she literally didn't know what to do on voting day, right? So, yeah, and she considers herself a Latina, right? And she works at a Hispanic marketing agency. So, I mean, and her father's from Buenos Aires, Argentina. And so he is a hardcore Democratic voter, and we had a conversation about what do we do? What does he do? And then my wife's mother, I'm calling her out.
Here we go.
Has never missed an election
I know.
in her entire
You know this is
life.
televised,
So
right?
I know.
Be careful.
You ready?
Okay.
Stayed home.
All right. I want to bring this discussion to, because it's 10:30, to a couple of areas. Okay.
Yeah,
We'll take it in 1 second. I'm going to take this question. Then what we'll do is I want to go into a couple areas that I think Nicole and Tiffany, I really want to hear from you on, which is future of media, and also from a business standpoint, since there's so little we know about. Actually, I don't know if that's a fair statement or not. You can decide if we know enough about where Trump wants to go. But from a business point of view, I want to get your advice on how those of us who are working in advocacy would work with him. But we're going to pause on that and take a question from the back.
Hi there. I'm Katie. I work in the tech community with Startup Plan, and this is for you, Tiffany. I'm curious if you have any insight into what issues we might be facing as a tech community or with startups and entrepreneurs with this administration, and anything we need to be vigilant about and watching and active about in the next months and years as we move forward.
Well, and that kind of ties into what we're kind of the next step of the discussion. And I'll say at the onset that not engaging is not an option. I'll say to begin, the tech community kind of engaged both of the campaigns, the Trump campaign and the Clinton campaign, to say, to establish, please come out with a tech agenda. The tech economy is a growing part of the U.S. economy, and it's important that we hear from the candidates. And while we did hear something from Secretary Clinton We were disappointed that we never heard anything from the Trump campaign. But what we're able to realize today is that that didn't matter necessarily to the electorate. You know, it was kind of very laser focused on a set of issues. One of the things we also did, I want to thank Hamina and Phone to Action, is that we participated in National Voter Registration Day to kind of engage tech voters, to engage our member companies, to make sure that they had the resources to vote. Because every opportunity we can to increase the number of participants in our democracy is positive and needed. So what do we do now? We play the cards we're dealt. That's what we do. And I think we have to find while there will be a lot of challenges, I think it's incumbent upon us, and that's our responsibility, to try to find some opportunities. One of the things that our CEO has done, he wrote a piece in Fortune not too long ago to say, kind of what's the way forward? And I think it comes from both sides. I think it's incumbent upon President-elect Trump to kind of reach out, not just with the tech community, but of the larger community. Like, you won, and you'll be the president now, and it's important to kind of try to bring the country back together from a very divisive and difficult election. I can say from the tech community, we're looking at opportunities to engage. He will be the president. He will be setting tech policy. But one of the important things and kind of the constant from this election is that you still have relatively the same Congress. And the value in that is that you still have some very good members of Congress who are well-versed in tech policy. And so while the Trump campaign and the transition campaign may not be as laser focused on tech policy, there are members of Congress in the House and the Senate, both Republicans and Democrats, who are laser focused on tech policy. They are still there, they are still active, and they have been doing this and working on tech policy for years. So when it comes to unleashing more spectrum, when it comes to making sure that the Internet of Things is able to thrive, when you look at self-driving cars, there is established policy on the Republican side on how to do that best. And so to the extent possible, I think that Congress will play a definitive role in tech policy. And so where are those kind of opportunities? Well, let's talk about the challenges. We kind of already know. Immigration is going to be tough, but it's not something we will shy away from. What CTA believes as we move forward tech policy, we're not going to shy away from it. We will be vocal. In areas where we can work with you, we're there. We'll be a partner, and in areas where we disagree with you, we will let that be known. So immigration and trade will be very tough issues, but that doesn't mean we don't continue the fight. So where are the opportunities? One of the things we've been advocating at CTA is making sure we support disruptive innovation, and those are startups. So how do we clear the underbrush and make sure that you're able to thrive? And that's where there are some areas to work with the new Trump administration on how do we get rid of regulatory barriers. So there are opportunities there. We're kind of seeking to find out, kind of put together what those opportunities might be. But patent trolls, that's something that affects large businesses but also small ones. And so we see that as an area that we can work together. There's some changes in the Democratic leadership on the Senate side that might bode well to getting something done. So that's an area we think that we can work on. Infrastructure is important, but you kind of lay that with broadband and the importance of broadband adoption, broadband infrastructure and increasing adoption. That's something that we can work on. So down the list, there are opportunities. I mean, if you look at kind of the conversation, I think someone mentioned, the kind of industrial, I come from a family that worked at steel mills and auto companies. That's different now. It's changed. So one of the conversations that CTA will be having is, what is the future of work and what does that look like? And how do we make sure that, we have access to the best talent? That's making sure that, students are, going into STEM fields. Not everybody's going to be a programmer, but those skill sets are incredibly important. And then back to immigration, making sure we have access to the best and most talented workforce here in the country. So there are opportunities, but there will be challenges. It won't be easy, but it is incumbent upon us to engage, and we will.
All right, the phone lines are lighting up. I think we have a question in the back.
Yes, good morning. How are you, all of you? Thank you for making us a topic of your meeting today. My name is Maria Patricia Corrales. I'm the president of Fiesta DC, which is the largest festival here in the District of Columbia. And we use Phone to Action for several campaigns for us. But I have a question for all of you. All of you are talking, and I'm a grassroots. I was in Pennsylvania walking the streets for something that you just mentioned Voice of America, which is, to me, I was like, who am I doing this for? Question, but irrelevant right now. My question to all of you is how you're going to help us to understand what the college electoral votes are. How you're gonna disseminate to my people that it doesn't matter if you're gonna go and vote. Is the understanding of the weight of those electoral colleges. That if I don't get all these people in one precinct, it's not going to go well for me if I just walk by myself. That case, I think all of you are going to be in need of helping us to understand how this election went and how it's going to be our election for 2020. Please.
And I'll speak on behalf of Telemundo and I'm sure of Univision. I think that's the number one thing that we need to focus on. Right now we're swimming in a pool of fear. Half the time we're there because we don't really understand the process. And I think that having an educational campaign and using media, social media and whatnot to almost start again, right?
I'd like to be a part of whatever it is that it's going to do because I'm going to be a victim. Because these
Ándale.
First of all,
please, thank you.
First of all, when you ask us what are we going to do, I'm going to go back to we again, and I put the we in this everyone in this room and everyone that's watching on this webcast. It is our civic duty, civic responsibility to lead by example. And one of the campaigns, I guess what we're focusing on now after kind of, I omitted the secret sauce of Univision's campaign. Secret sauce, and to Aaron's point, is this localized messaging through national community-based organizations and community partners. They were key to the success of the Latino voter turnout. Absolutely key. And the work you did is an example, I'm sure, with your organization, is an example of how we engage and how engaging these local communities, what type of results we could look at. It really is, if I can bring it back to tech too, and because Phone to Action is graciously, they were able to convene us. If you look at an equation of tech and media, to me that equals access to information. So what we can do, if we could get the media, and again I'm going back to what I said earlier, all media, this time digital, local, network, and look at our partners in the tech industry and see what we can do and address this issue together. We could accomplish your goals, and to not only Aaron, to really address your wife's question of information, Maria, yours too. But one other subheader that is really, again, that is in any other election in general, it would be a header, is the online voter registration success. It was through the roof in that weekend. You could Google any state and put online voter registration, and records were shattered. To me, there's an opportunity for us to, as a community, to look at kind of getting together and targeting that area, as well as providing access to information for all.
So just to layer on top of that, so when we look at the convergence of technology and media, it creates a significant amount of opportunity for those who have access to that technology and that media. So when we talk about developing a campaign or a Get Out the Vote initiative that's about engaging with historically underserved communities in an election, it's about leveraging not just the technology and not just the boots on the ground and the field activation, but we cannot dismiss the power of the story we have to tell. Storytelling and the message and how it's delivered to these communities is what is going to put someone in a voting booth or make them stay home, okay? So that messaging, coming from a national organization, whether it's the RNC or the DNC or the candidates, needs to be localized and relevant, hyper-relevant to those constituents within those markets. Technology and social media allow us to engage with those audiences, but if your messaging is not resonant at an emotional level, you lose. Because people are voting now not on academic, very rigorous processes on getting to a policy objective. It's the emotional soundbite that is driving it. Now it needs to be sound, or else you get eviscerated on the traditional media. But at the end of the day, that's how people are voting now. right? I think attention spans are down to 6 or 8 seconds. I mean, that is significant.
So speaking of which, we have a couple more questions that I want to get to. I think this gentleman here, in my brain, raised his hand first. So let's go there, and then we'll get the two of you.
Thank you. My name is Matthew Fitting. I'm with the American Heart Association, although the question I'm about to ask has nothing to do with the Heart Association. I want to be clear. So based on the results last Tuesday, in the last 5 elections, 40% of the time, the popular vote winner has not won the Electoral College. I think that brings up a lot of important questions. One about fairness. I think it also makes me question, obviously the Clinton campaign had its flaws, but they did get more people to vote for them. But also just, tuning in more to this question of disenfranchisement and disillusion. And I say this as a native of Central Pennsylvania who has, my state has definitely enjoyed the attention the Electoral Colleges has afforded. I was also in Pennsylvania last week knocking on doors trying to get out the vote. But it's been really startling now as a resident of DC, being disenfranchised for a number of reasons, but also thinking about these people in these non-swing states, how they must feel about this process, how that makes them feel about politics in general. And then just also, the disillusionment that feeds into. So I'm curious, the thoughts the panel might have on that. It's been a great panel. Thank you so much for your perspectives. But I just haven't heard this touched on yet, and I wanted to be sure that we did.
Why don't you go ahead?
I'll go for, I'll keep it brief.
Zach, I'd love to hear your perspective too, because you've worked on presidential campaigns. But
I'll do just a quick response. I mean, we need to celebrate some of our local and state victories. From a Latino perspective, we netted out 5 new members of Congress, including the first Latina senator. And so those really deserve celebrations. There's some other victories that happened in Arizona with a particular sheriff. Those deserve celebration. So it's a very valid point and something that we're looking into folding into at least some of the messaging that we create moving forward.
Well, I think the Electoral College, the challenge is, right, like you're not trying to win a popular vote, which is why campaigns aren't run that way. It's to use that as like using basketball scoring to judge a baseball match. Like, it just doesn't make sense. And I get it. Like, I get the frustration when you talk about it, but like campaigns aren't built for that. Campaigns are really ultimately resource allocation to trying to get to a specific end goal as they go through, right? The goal is to get the most electoral votes. That is the outcome as it goes through. To the fact that we're even having these conversations that we should be the popular vote and we should flip it out because, and all the people celebrating it right now are the people 4 years ago being like, this is crazy, this is unnecessary. Like that, I think that's the challenge. And I think this is what actually the larger narrative is like destroying the media because everyone's willing to flip for whatever's in their best interest in the short term. And so there's no credibility anymore. Like Slate takes 2 sides of the same position within 2 weeks. Like, look what Melania Trump wears on this. It's white, it's terrible. Look how Hillary Clinton's on white. This is awesome. It's so demeaning. But on the flip side, it's kind of like seeping into the entire system that no one's trusting what's coming out now. And to me, that is the challenge that we have with the electoral vote argument is different. I'm a campaign operative. Obviously, other people here have different perspectives on it. Like, we get a very specific task, like go win the most electoral votes possible. And I think that's what was interesting about this. We were told there was no path to victory as a Republican this cycle, right? There was this blue wall that could never be broken down. And I think as a result, it made Democrats take for granted a lot of people they needed to talk to and a lot of people that they need to spend more time and effort into. So that's the challenge as you go through this, right? Like, they have to kind of look internally to see how do they try to win these elections as they go forward. And I think as an operative, as I look at it, like, there are only positive opportunities for Republicans going forward because we've kind of set a benchmark. We now also know what we need to improve. The difference is when you're in power, it is a lot easier to move forward because a lot of what we're all talking about here is we should talk more, we should have we're in this era of big data, small content. We know lots about you, but we have nothing to say. And so now organizations have to come together and say, okay, how do I reorganize myself to structure myself to be able to do something with that? Because that's what a lot of these groups can't actually realize. We just spent billions of dollars on TV to probably change very few people's opinion. But the billions of dollars went into that, right? Like, whereas you could have spent time on the ground, you could spend time registering voters, there's all these things, but the incentives are still upside down until those things are changed. These are structural changes. They're not tactical changes that have to go in. I hope the Republicans figure that out faster because my livelihood depends upon that, right? Like, as we go through this process. But it's not difficult to figure it out, but you have to have everyone kind of approach that problem and change it. That is the single hardest part that we do, is just changing how people run campaigns. I cannot believe in congressional races that 75 cents on the dollar goes to hit a voter who's not even in your district. So think about it as a brand. Like, it's illegal to vote for the product, right? So only 25 cents on the dollar is well spent before only half of them turn out to vote and you only need half of them to win. When you're getting down to like 6 cents of efficiency, we just spent $8 billion trying to do that as it goes through. And then we wonder when we look back, we're like, well, no one's talking to anyone online. Of course they're not. Like, it's crazy.
That's a key point. Content consumption globally is at an all-time high. TV ratings are at an all-time low. So if we're spending $7 out of $10 on television and broadcast and cable, your audience is not there, okay? So it's then finding out how do we reallocate and restructure campaign design to map our media presence to where our audiences are consuming content, but not just where. We also need to find out what context they're consuming it in.
Who gets the broadcast buys?
The buyers.
The general
Correct.
fans. I mean,
Right.
yeah, I mean, I agree with you.
Correct.
The incentives are upside down. You need to take a
Right.
step back and we can have a larger conversation of it, but like, that is, the incentives are wrong. The way campaigns are, it's broken. It's fundamentally broken. Until that's done, we have to unleash the creative potential of the budgets to solve these problems. We take the smallest part. We want to talk about Twitter 90% of the time, and we spend 1% of our dollars on it. Television, no one looks at, and we spend 90% of our dollars, and everyone just assumes there's like a magic box. And like, this was the cycle the magic box was meant to deliver.
Right.
And it didn't. So the question is now, how do we like question that?
So I know we have a couple more questions from the audience, but I want to ask Nicole something because Nicole and I had a very interesting conversation right before this panel that I mentioned I wanted to bring up. But Donald Trump said during the campaign, and the question is going to be about, because we all raise this, but how much trust we have in media, but also the role of technology. Twitter. Trump is obviously famously active on Twitter. But Trump said, I'm not running against crooked Hillary Clinton, I'm running against the crooked media. And one of the questions I asked earlier, Nicole, and you and I talked about earlier, is whether there is an elitist bias to the media. I think that's how I phrased it to you. And then the other thing I want to point out is that, because some of you touched on this earlier, is that social media and other types might not have the same credibility problem. And there's a stat that said 20% of social media users modified their stance on a political or social issue this year because of social media. And that's kind of what Zach was talking about, but we have completely inefficient designs to our campaigns that are leading to poor resource allocation decisions. But Nicole, is the media crooked?
Is the media crooked? Sure. No, I'm kidding. You know what? I think this is a time where we have literally seen, channels take sides, and it's really it's embarrassing to a certain degree, and I'm sorry to have to say that, but I can't deny the fact that in some cases you're going to turn on a Fox, you're going to know what to expect, and there are directives from the top down that are given on a daily basis, and it's just the way that things have evolved, unfortunately. Now, I did want to make the point that I think. And it's, I'm not speaking from just because I work for Telemundo, but I do see the inside, and I think there is a difference between Spanish language television stations, Spanish language media, and mainstream media. And I think it's, I don't want to say anything negative about any particular channel, but what I'm saying about Telemundo and certainly Univision is that that's not the space that we're playing in necessarily. We really our responsibility is different. It is a target market. We do speak to the Hispanic consumer and the viewer, and so we haven't necessarily taken on that kind of slant, if you will. Do I think it's happening? Yes. Do I think that we need to kind of bring it back to where we can be more fair and balanced? Yes. And for a lot of different reasons. It could be funding, it could be, party association and what that's going to do for you as far as a media channel is concerned. But at the end of the day, I think I'd love to sit and say, no, we're all fair and balanced. On a general opinion, I'll say that we've gone a little bit off our track and we need to get back.
It's not about slant. No, yes, mainstream media is very elitist. Yes. You have to understand in terms of look at the people. So let's just deal with questions, okay? Look at every single Republican debate and look at every single Democratic debate and look at the questions that were asked. So I'll ask you this question here. How many questions were specifically asked in any of these debates that dealt with the state of public education in America? Virtually none. Do you know why? Because the people asking the damn questions, their kids go to private school. That's why. And the people who they were sitting in the rooms with, who are the producers, their kids go to private school. Yes, they are elitist. Look, I spent 6 years at CNN. The Washington, D.C. Bureau couldn't stand me. Because I was hired through New York. Because they were like, oh, we don't know who the hell this guy is. Yeah, but I live in a world you don't live in. That's part of the problem. Part of the problem is just like we sit here, when Harriet Miers was picked by Bush to be a Supreme Court nominee, do you know what the assholes in D.C. said? Oh, my gosh, she went to SMU.
Assholes.
Yes. It was as if SMU was some podunk law school. It wasn't Harvard, Yale. It wasn't one of the Ivies. That actually what they were actually saying. And so that's part of this issue. So questions that are asked, things that are posed in terms of how they are the gatekeepers. The reason social media has changed that because that's breaking down the barriers. The reason Telemundo and Univision, the reason what we do at TV One is so different is because our audience says we don't trust Jake Tapper. We trust Roland. Because Roland speaks for us. He's going to ask a question that they're not going to ask about. They're not going to challenge them on the question of unions locking out folks for years. And so when you want to talk about an infrastructure bill, when Gene Sperling comes on my show, I say, okay, are you going to talk to the unions to make sure we get trade jobs, not apprentice jobs? They're not going to ask that question. Anderson Cooper's not going to ask that question. Megyn Kelly's not going to ask that question because of perspective. And so that's part of the fundamental problem we have here. And so when our audience, and I'm saying our, when black folks see someone like me, or they see Jorge, or they see Jose, they're saying he's asking or she's asking what I want to know because they're coming from a whole different perspective. And that's the elitism they're talking about. So that's why when I see Joe Scarborough and Mika sitting there talking about media elite, and I'm going, you do know it's 5 white people sitting around the table having a conversation, talking about minority voters and elitism, and I'm going, can y'all please pass the mirror? That's a fundamental issue, and what you're seeing is even worse when you look at the executive suites, because that's who's deciding what goes on the show. On my show, I'm the host and the managing editor. If I don't want to go, we're talking about elitism, if I don't approve it, it doesn't go on. I don't have some executive coming down and saying, you have to do this. That's the difference when you have different voices, and our audience is saying, we trust them, we don't trust them. So when they say, we don't trust media, they're talking about them.
All right. We had a couple more questions from the audience. Let's go for it.
Thanks. My name is Brad, and I'm really enjoying the discussion here. I think it was a really interesting point you all made about advocacy kind of being on its head, looking to television to drive our advocates' opinions, to reach an audience that may be hard to reach, rather than social media and other digital forms. So I'm just curious, as you take the lessons of this election and move them ahead to 2017, 2018, what's the message that you would give organizations that are interested in reaching into these communities and getting their advocates to speak, to add their voice, and what are the best ways to do this? I mean, we talked about television being a bit ineffective, but what are those ways that we can make the voices heard, especially in light of a Republican Congress and a Republican presidency?
Well, I'd add that, phone to action is something that CTA has used on a number of our policy issues, but I know that phone to action has done things much broader than kind of policy issues. They've worked on criminal justice reform. They've worked on, getting folks registered to vote, and we found it from a business perspective and advocacy perspective incredibly helpful because no one's going to go to we can have great rallies and talk about great policy, but again, how do you get those people to act, and what's the medium that people are using? It's their mobile phone. And so what we have found success in putting it right in the hands of our advocates to say, if you're passionate about this issue, all you've got to do is text. We will keep you updated. You can email your member of Congress, but more importantly, you can post to their Facebook pages, their Twitter, post them on Twitter. And so we found that level of engagement very different than buying an ad in Politico or buying writing an editorial. Like we do it's a mix. We do all of those pieces, but we found great engagement when we engage our advocates across the country, especially on a grassroots level. We've had great success in some cities and in states where we've been fighting against issues, regulations on ride sharing or home sharing. We found great success, and so we'll continue to do that because we think that engages a different set of advocates than your typical person who would read an ad or see an ad in Politico or the Washington Post. And those are the advocates that are going to be the most passionate and most helpful.
You tell them you are a constituent. It does not matter how you voted. You are a constituent, and whoever's in power still should speak to your interest. Tell them don't take the next 4 years off if 81% Latinos voted for Clinton, if 94% are black. You are a constituent in this country, and they must be accountable to you.
I think, though, and that all makes sense, is like if you want to actually move someone's opinion, though, right? You have to find things. You have to sit down as an organization and understand where you ultimately want to go. I would argue that we don't do enough of that. I think most advocacy campaigns are really poorly run as they go through, much like campaigns, right? Like television is terrible, followed closely by someone who sends like a digital email that then gets filtered into a mass spam response, and everyone gets the same kind of things back. It's like, I mean, there's a reason that when you call into offices and you create friction, 200 phone calls shuts down a congressional office for a day. Like, no one really is willing to put like the time and the pain into the places to really apply pressure, right? Like, it's one of the things that both sides have to figure out, how do they have governing majorities, because like 100 people on Twitter who are tweeting at a congressman every day, they freak out. It's 100 people, right? Like, and as it goes through, but they're a disproportional voice. And I think everyone has to take a step back and say, what are my end goals I'm looking to do? And is it actually, what is it, a type of contact? Is it an intercept? Is it an opt-ed? It all comes together, but we've somehow become paint by numbers, where it's like, okay, well, it's 2, so it's red. And it's like, and it's all, they all look the same and they feel the same. And so to the offices, they feel the same too. And they actually, you could do them more inefficiently, cost efficiently, but you need more people. That's the one problem. You have to invest in people, because you have to invest in message. Because I was saying before, big data, small content, people don't realize the real explosion that's coming is like the approval side. Like, can you say things in multiple language? Do you know what you want to say to different groups? How do you treat a single female differently than a female over 50? Like, what are you going to do differently as you go through? And those questions are hard to answer, so people pass them by. And I think that's the question. If you want to actually have an impact in advocacy going forward, it's taking these things and asking yourselves hard questions internally to answer. Because most people take the path that's easiest to get approved, and then they go through and they run these huge advocacy campaigns through DC, and they all suck, and then nothing changes. They would have got the same outcome and could have saved themselves the money along the way as they go through. And to me, that's what's really lost. And people know they're inefficient, but there's kind of like it's easy just to do.
The playbook's broken, right? I mean, we need to recognize as practitioners, okay, in advocacy and public affairs, that we need to re-earn the trust of the constituencies that we're engaging with. It's been lost, okay? It's been lost by, the media environment, the business environment, the banking environment, the athletics environment have all, had moments of fraudulence over the past few years, right? So constituents look at the information and from the voice that it's coming to them through a different lens that we may not realize. So research is absolutely critical to understand that, but in order for us to shape a public policy initiative moving forward via empowering constituents, they need to trust us. They need to trust that the information that we are giving them and the messaging is not only going to benefit them, their communities, and their futures, okay, but also it's not just simply benefiting the media environment or the messenger that's coming out. So we need to clearly articulate that there is a mutually shared interest in the policy outcome, and that it's not one-sided, okay? So earning that trust is going to take time over the next 4 years.
All right, team, we have time, I think, for one more question, or maybe 2. I'll tell you what, if we answer them quickly, we'll do 2 more questions. And then let's just go right, as we answer the second question, into our closing. And Zach, at the beginning, I asked a really stupid question, which was just, has politics changed forever? And the answers were mostly kind of in the middle. There's sort of yes, sort of no. But I wanted to revisit that at the very end, and then kind of use that as a way for all of you to kind of give your closing thoughts. But we'll take a question here, and then a question here, and then after the second one, let's just go right into your closing thoughts, and we'll get everybody back to work and being productive Americans.
Hi, my name is Stacy Whittle. I work for Free Range. Oscar Wilde once said, in matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. And I think Trump really understood that. And what he had is what I call success, which is strategy plus story equals scale. Clinton had strategy. She thought she would get scale. He had the story. We're entering into this era of the story wars. So how can we, as Democrats, or at least for me, feel more passionate and develop a story that will then resonate like Trump's did?
You should go back and listen to the 1988 speech that Reverend Jackson gave in Atlanta at the convention. If you listen to that speech, that was Bernie Sanders. That was actually Trump. You listen to that speech, I guarantee you'll be moved to tears, especially the last 3.5 minutes. That's actually the Democratic narrative. But you have to remember, after his runs in 84 to 88, that's why the DOC was created, because they were actually scared of that movement. It was a populist movement. That's why the DOC was created. And so Sanders runs. When you listen to Elizabeth Warren, she sounds exactly like Reverend Jackson in 84 and 88. You also have to remember his runs in 84 and 88. The reason there is a President Obama, because that was winner take all. He changed the rules with Harold Ickes, Ron Brown, and Ron Walter to proportional delegation. That's how the Democratic Party changed. If you want to know where you go, you listen to that speech, and that's your path forward.
All right, let's go right into our last question.
Hi, everyone. My name's Melanie from Sound Exchange, just down the road. This question, you touched on it earlier on tech, but it's a slightly different can of worms, and it might be a little too soon to tell, but I'm wondering, you know, talking to a bunch of media industry folk, how do you expect that this Trump administration might affect your businesses? Not socially, but you know, any issues on intellectual property, spectrum, net neutrality? Does anything come up for you guys?
Tiffany?
I mean, I guess I'll say it's an open question. I mean, anyone who can definitively say where tech policy is going to go doesn't remember what happened a week ago. Again, I think, you know, there's some value in the fact that Congress is pretty much set. It changed on the margins, but generally the main players in tech policy are still there. And while we were very critical that Trump hadn't come out with a tech agenda, it allows for a more robust conversation and an opportunity. So, you know, it'll be about who he surrounds himself with in tech policy, right? And that's not clear right now. But again, you know, not to get into closing statements, but you know, not engaging is not an option. And I think every opportunity to engage with this new administration, one, we want good and sound policy, and you don't get it if you don't engage. So we will be engaging at every turn.
All right. Okay, so for as we close, only because I had this stat and I didn't find another chance to bring it out, so I just bring it out. You can work it into your closing statements or not. But it does touch on something that we talked about a lot, which is how Trump campaigned, his strategy. And in the 5 months preceding Election Day, Trump ran 68,000 ads when Mitt Romney ran 128,000 ads. Television ads, not digital. These are just TV ads. That's a shocking drop. And I know this because I used to work at a media company. I know what their expectations are around political advertising, and we've got others, media companies here as well. And I think that they were all probably pretty disappointed. Anyway, work that in, don't work that in. But Zach's politics changed forever?
Yeah, I think it has. I don't think everyone realizes it, but it's fundamentally shifted. I think the shift's been coming. I think Trump is going to expedite it. I think a lot of campaigns will still run the battles from 2012 and prior to that, but they will most likely end up losing more and more consistently as they go through the process. I mean, I think you're right. The fragmentation that's really going to occur, that television is going to be the first kind of core thing to crumble as it goes through from a price perspective. It's not that it's not the most powerful weapon. It's at what price? And this is the question that no one's willing to ask themselves, right? Like when you're looking when Jeb Bush is buying, the super PAC's buying $1.6 million of Boston broadcast to get a New Hampshire primary voting Republican, and then you look at the numbers and it's 3.4% of viewership is Republican primary voters in New Hampshire. So for every $1.6 million he's spending, Ted Cruz could offset that with $50,000 of Facebook ads directly to people who are primary voters in New Hampshire, right? Like those are the numbers. So that's how a small person can outperform a large person from a purely math equation component of it. Like we've got all the other components, storytelling, everything else. But when that breaks, it will fundamentally realign the entire kind of like industrial complex of political campaigns, because these are where the billions of dollars are run. And I think, you know, the problem is the big donors who are writing these big checks, these political advisors they surround themselves with are the ones who've told them for the last 6 years TV is the most effective thing. So they either have to say, I was wrong, but I'm better now, or I was wrong, you should replace me, which I don't think any of them are going to say. So the question now has to become, how am I going to pivot through this? And so Trump has really kind of broken. I mean, Hillary I mean, the Mint numbers are minuscule even compared to what Hillary was spending, right? Like as we went through this and we go through the components. And that's what's kind of fascinating as we go forward. I think you're going to see this again and again. I think House races, you could easily win House races now if you took a more cost-effective approach to these type of things, and people will outperform and they will go through. But again, these are kind of things at the margins, but it will change how campaigns are fundamentally run in the future, I think, on a massive scale, which has huge impact across all of industry and all of DC as a result.
Awesome. So thank you. I promised Jeb and Jimena that we'd be done by 11. So let's, for our final thoughts, do like 30 seconds, tie it, a bow on it, whatever the
Well,
metaphor
you
is.
know, I think in light of how communication is going, I think it's an era of concepts and not details. And I think that we need to be responsible as media, as citizen journalists, as people to refine our communication, to refine it. Pick the words that we use, pick them wisely so that we're not, we're making people want to fight and act aggressively and violently. But I think it is obviously, Hillary makes a 10-page export plan and Donald Trump comes in, make America great again, and here we are. So I think we need to be responsible, concise, and take our concepts seriously.
I would just say, what I said earlier, yes, for now, politics has changed, but we need to be listening, and we need to be keyed into the right channel. Increasingly, we understand that's technology, tech and social media. So we need to just make sure that we continue to be attuned into the electorate.
So from my perspective matters. Campaigns need to be run through the lens of the constituencies and the benefits that those candidates and those policies have on the communities that they're serving, right? To earn trust back, they need to run campaigns and frameworks that bring to bear the perspective of the American constituencies.
If you asked the average woman what is Title IX, she would likely know what it is. But if you asked her what section does it come from, she probably couldn't tell you. It's from the Civil Rights Act of '64. If you ask someone, American Disabilities Act, the exact same thing. When I talked about voter suppression earlier, most people think that, as African Americans, Latinos, you largely had African American Latinos fighting for voter suppression. But the efforts targeted elderly voters. We saw it in Wisconsin, white elderly voters. It targeted women. It targeted young voters, African American, Latino. You will see the Republican Party try to do this again, because if they can keep turnout low, it allows them a better chance to actually win elections. The battle has to be, how do you protect the most fundamental thing, and that is the right to the ballot. You protect that, you literally change elections. And so I can guarantee you this, to the Trump presidency, to the RNC, to state Republicans all across the country. Like my fraternity brother Vertner Woodson Tandy said, when it comes to voter suppression, we will fight until hell freezes over, and then we will fight on the ice.
I'm going to say we need to be careful of overthinking this. And coming from a different perspective, a unique perspective, we as a Latino community we have something to celebrate. And as we move forward, I was listening to your question and around storytelling, we have to really recognize our audience to remember who they are. For the Latinos, there's 66,000 Latinos turning 18 each month. And that number is only going to increase. There's a polycultural movement coming up from our youth. And I'm not sure storytelling is going to be good, but we need to focus on the vehicles and how we're going to go about reaching them too, if not more so than what we're telling them. So in closing, we all have our work cut out for us. Nathan, to your question, has it changed forever? I like to take a step back, and I said, nothing's forever again. Zach, I said, but death and taxes. But definitely there is change, and we just need to be really continue. It's only a week after the election. So not bad for after a week, right? For 1 week. So if we can continue these type of conversations and gatherings, I think we've got a good thing going.
Thank you. Well, I just want to say what an absolute honor and pleasure was to be here with all of you. These are six obviously extremely intelligent, articulate, very experienced people with different points of view. I found this very illuminating. I loved the questions. Thank you very much. And thank all of you for coming this morning. And a special thanks to Phone to Action for putting this all together.
Let's give a big hand for the panel. Thank you very much. Zach, Nicole, Tiffany, Aaron, Roland, Ron, Nathan, thank you so much for your time, for sharing your thoughts here today. And a big thanks to the audience for spending your time here with us this morning. So many partners. It's great to see you. Big clap. And the big takeaways for me are we need to know our audience. We need to personalize communications, and we need to focus on high value, highly visible communications. That will help in advocacy in 2017. Thank you.